while I got you about that time period, I read a comment online from Buster Brown guitarist John Moon, which I wish to run past you. He said, unfortunately, as is the case for most bands, vinyl didn't really capture what the band was like live. We were a lot more aggressive live. I've always thought that Rose Tattoo was the grown-up version of Buster, and that is pretty much what we aspired to, but with the addition of keyboards. Fairly accurate assessment, you think?
I don't think you could find a better one. I think one of the things that I didn't remember this until I read something about in a book written about Sunbury, and it alluded to the fact, and it is a fact, and I didn't remember it. I had no recollection. Buster Brown was one of the few bands that ever got an encore. Okay. And and you can read that, and you can read it in the book. It's there as a quote. One of the few bands to get an encore at Sunbury was Buster Brown. The band was very much it was modelled once I joined, and still to this day I want to do this as a project, if you like, before my days are done. I want to do my favourite rock and roll band of all time is the Faces, and the Tats were very, very much Buster was very, very much modelled around that. I tried to bring as much of an influence. In fact, we used to do a song called Borstal Boys we did a few other Rod Stewart songs too, like Stay With Me and
Love Borstal Boys. It still sounds
Borstal
phenomenal
Boys
today. Yep.
It's a mighty rock and roll track.
It is.
And it's just one of the most, and it is, when you think of Borstal Boys, you think of one of the boys, you think of Buster Brown, you see him walking down every street in every town, blah, blah, blah. That whole boys song thing, which has served the Tats very well. But it started with Buster. And Mooney's Luna, as of course that's his nickname, Luna. It's one of those things that, I don't know where you saw that, but that's it doesn't surprise me that Luna would come out with that, because Luna was. We had a couple of intellects in the band. Certainly not me and Phil, but or even Geordie, who'd not yet become the thinking man's bass player. But Darky Wilson, Chris Wilson, the keyboard player, and Luna were definitely more than just sort of like rock players, as in the sense they had a vision. Hence the, like when you listen to the arrangement now in Buster, you think, oh Jesus, how many parts can it have? But it was Darky's obsession with sort of like, Yes and all those kind of, like concept, musically structural bands. And it was his way of trying to, not that it was a snobby thing, don't get me wrong, but trying to like the thing of the day was that there was a lot of musicality going on with a lot of the bands that were doing things like excitingly in music, right? But so none of us envisaged Buster as being like Yes, but there were elements of Yes about the soaring, the grandioso part of some of their arrangements and their instrumentation. Coupled with, and they had, extremely, melodic vocals and, beautiful notes being sung by beautiful singers. Whereas we had this, this raspy blues singer and a very sophisticated musical lineup. And when I say sophisticated, I mean in the sense of like Matt Lake and, what was there, Sebastian Hardy and other bands around at the time that were, Ayers Rock. I mean, fuck me. I used to go and see, because I loved Ayers Rock, because I loved all the blokes. We were mates, but I'd go and watch them play and I'd just sort of wet myself how good they were. I mean, Aerial, Mertz Spectrum, whatever you like to call them, they fucking, just were amazing to watch, but to listen to. They had this fucking amazing thing going on. But anyway, long story short, I waffle. Sorry. Luna has summed it up beautifully, and you can tell if you close your eyes. I mean, some of the beautiful things on like Dear Lady and a couple of other songs on Buster. You can really tell the faces thing, but we had a real hard edge, which never was. I don't know what the thinking was, and this is no criticism of Lobby, but we worked on a shoestring budget because the whole budget went to 3 other bands, predominantly the Skyhooks. But I think we produced that album for like somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 or some ridiculous amount of money. And we recorded it pretty much over a couple of nights, and we recorded it pretty much live because there was very little budget for any sort of like production or sort of value or whatever. So, and it never got close. But I mean, when you think of a song like Something to Say, one of the, and this is, there's a bit of trivia for you. You don't notice until you actually listen to the song. But when they did the bed track, it was so late at night, everyone was tired. They left a passage, like all the verses are like 4s or 8s, right? 4 lines or 8 lines. The last verse is missing a line. It's missing a line because the bed track was recorded. They went home, I did the vocal, and we came to the end and it ran out. I said, wait a minute, there's not enough room for the last line. And Lobby, and I can't remember the guy that was producing it, said, well, you'll just have to drop a line. So there's a missing line out of Something to Say on that album. And I look at my lyric book, and there it is. So the next time we get to record that song, it'll have the fucking extra line in it.
I had Phil lined up for an interview last year, which fell through right at the very last moment. But I was going to suggest to him that he should include Something to Say, in his set list when he was doing his solo thing. But before I move on from Buster Brown, I once read that Phil had a rehearsal with the Tats around 83. Is that true or false?
Yeah.
He did?
No, it's true.
Okay. How did that come about?
It was because he was no longer in AC/DC. He wanted to do something, and he came down, had a rehearsal, and he just said, I'm not ready.
Okay.
And it never eventuated.